Hello, and welcome to Fintech Surge Podcast, creating a wealth of opportunities through fintech innovations in the Middle East for the Middle East. Powered by Fintech Surge, the region's leading fintech festival, hosted by Dubai World Trade Center alongside GITEX Global. Hi, welcome to the Fintech Surge Podcast. I'm excited to be joined today by the one and only Alan Vaksman, founder and general partner at Digital Horizon. Thank you for joining us, Alan.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Great. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with Digital Horizon, it's actually a VC firm based out of London with an extremely impressive portfolio, if I must say so myself. They represent some of the biggest up-and-coming names in technology, including Lemonade, Klarna, Monday.com, Bolt, Ably, Kuva, Trax, Honest, and a whole bunch of others. So, Alan, thanks for joining us. And I kind of wanted to start off this podcast in a similar way that I start off most of the podcast with the famous question. In your own words, what does fintech mean to you?
I think it's actually very easy, Stephen. First of all, it's two words. Fin, it means financial. That means anything which has got to do with finance. And what does finance do? Only four simple things. We either transact, so we buy things on this, or we borrow, like loans, credit cards, anything, or we insure, and that's all insurance products. Or we save, and that's all your investments and saving products. That's what it. So that's the finance part of it. But there's also a second part of it called tech. It has to have technology behind it. It has to be scalable. It can't be just by very clever four bankers. So those two, finance and technology, give you a fintech together. But let me know if it's explained well.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, it's a great introduction to, what fintech is all about. But obviously, running a VC where you invest into a lot of fintechs. How did you actually develop an interest in the fintech space?
I think it's more coming out with a background of founding partners. So my background really comes from finance. I did financial risk for many years. I did credit. I did derivatives. So coming out of that world, you really understand the real fin part of it, the business needs about it, the gaps which are in the current financial services offered around the world. And then what you do is you try to introduce technology. How I got into there is by building two companies. So by co-founding two companies, building them from scratch, my co-founders, and then exiting them, that's how you really kind of understand how the tech is built, what it takes to build a great company. And with the financial background, that's how I came to fintech, I guess, personally.
That's great. And do you believe that your path to fintech is a common path? Do people typically start off as finance people and build technology around their finance, or is it more of tech people that decide to break into the finance space?
I think it's both ways. So if you look at the B2C, most of the B2C founders actually come from a tech space. They're not financiers. They're more consumer focused, understanding the pains of the clients, understanding how the e-commerce work, and how the digital products really built. When you look at the B2B fintechs, there are more financial backgrounds because it's more technical. You need to understand what clearing is, what custody is, what acquiring is, and on, which are very specific to understanding the finance. So B2C, I would say 65 to 35, 65% of founders coming more from a tech and product background, product building background. And I think the opposite is for B2B, where you got more founders coming from a financial background.
Yeah, sure. And why do you think that is? I mean, I think that it kind of makes sense to me that the B2C, they understand the needs of the common person. And so they might have, a technical background and they're building something around finance because that's what they understand. But yeah, B2B, whenever you're having to deal with like institutions and banks and like really the back end nitty gritty of what goes behind finances, that might be more of a finance person that decides to create technology around their space.
Correct. I think it's all about really comfort of knowledge where you are. Where if
Hmm.
you are a technology person and you understand how technology works, and you're also an intelligent person, you understand the pains of a consumer, that's where your consumer tech, which is a lot of it is fintech, you like consumer digital banks, like everybody knows the top Chime, Revoluts of this world, Nubank in Brazil. So that's where usually it comes from. Some of them still have a financial background. It's not like all of them don't, but it's not as necessary.
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with a big bank and that's your main client, or a huge custodian, or a clearinghouse, or an exchange, you need to understand how to speak to those people. You need to understand what their pain is. And a common man on the street, which is not working in finance, just doesn't understand it. I think that's where the logic comes from.
Yeah, I imagine that it could be a tough shell to crack as well when you're dealing with the big banks and the clearing houses and the custodians. It's not exactly that everybody is welcome to have a sit down meeting with, the head of a bank that's going to implement these decisions.
Absolutely. I think it's another one is a completely different sales model.
Mm-hmm.
So where we're working in a B2C in fintech, most of your exports, it's now done via digital marketing. So that's digital channels like we all know, Facebook, TikToks, Instagrams, Googles of this world. When you really be building a B2B fintech on this, there it's still kind of old school business development. It's contacts, it's sitting around the table, as you said, with those people, speaking the same language, understanding and solving the complex problems which those institutions have.
Right, understanding their business interests as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for that overview. I guess it definitely makes sense. If I was to go into fintech, it would definitely be more from a consumer side, because as a consumer, I understand the needs of consumers. But if I had to go sit down with some of these banks or institutions, then I would be way out of my depth there. So tell me a little bit more about the digital horizon, and how do you kind of build your portfolio?
So I think we actually almost started Digital Horizon VC as any digital company starts. Uh, we started from a venture builder in 2016, really starting there. What is a venture builder? It's a venture building studio. It's when you build startups. You really put in money and you get busy with building it. And we built about 6 startups, and most of them were exited, sold. And that's how we got our experience and said, well, we understand now how this is done. And in 2018, we raised our first fund to invest in them. And that is the journey that's been on this. And once the first fund has now been fully allocated, invested in 26 companies,
Wow.
and then you raise your second fund and a third fund, and that's how the evolution really comes through on the VC side. We also realized from our venture building days is that in order to invest in something, in real venture, and not a lot of this stuff, which is, investing in 40 billion companies, which is more of a, I would say, close to public investment and PE investments than a venture itself, once they grow very big, is you need to have the specialization. You need to have really strong understanding of the vertical. And that's why we stuck to the fintech and B2B SaaS story around the world. So we see that the same business models, which worked in the US, which worked in Israel, which worked in then in Europe, then it comes to Middle East, and it comes to India. It's a very cyclical thing, because as different as we all are, the fundamental financial needs are actually quite similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And so 26 companies that you've invested in. I mean, you must have a clear formula for the companies that come in that you're going to choose. And with the success that the companies that you're invested into, with how many of them are exiting and how many of them are becoming successful startups, is it a matter of the ecosystem that you're building and the funds that you're putting into them, or are these companies that they would have been successful because they're amazing companies by amazing founders, and whichever VC they'd have gone with, they'd have become successful?
Look, I think there are two parts of it. One is how do you identify the companies?
Right.
And we really do kind of this dual sword approach, as we say. One is we issue our annual fintech trends, which use this as a podcast so anybody can download from our website, where we basically discuss that's where we see the fintech is going. So, for example, 3-4 years ago, we said it was open banking. We see for 2022 another trend around gig economy and self-employed and credit around those products. So we issue those and we try to invest according to the trends that we identified.
So forward-looking trends, right?
Yeah. Trends are usually 2-3 years ahead, at least, sometimes 4-5. The second how we do it is that by coming to the companies which follow those trends and identifying great teams. So we spend a lot of time trying to really show them that Digital Horizon VC is not just an investor, but it's a smart money. It's a money which helps. It's people that can understand the business and give you advice, connect you to other businesses like that. So I myself sit on various boards and I specialize in fintech, SME, self-employed quite a lot. So you will see me kind of understanding that ecosystem quite well. And that's our value to the company. Because money is money, but you need to have the right people around the table of investors, the right people around the board to really take you to the next step.
Exactly. So money is a tool, right? I mean, that's really what the whole point of this is.
Yeah. I think what we have, especially during the boom, which we had last 3 years, I would say, that money is plentiful. Do you have the smart investors? Do you have people that not just following the herd, but are trying to do something different? That's much harder to find, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess one of the questions, as you're mentioning and you're talking about the different startups that you invest in and what you look for, I'm kind of wondering, do you ever get, that entrepreneur that you really, really believe in who they are and what they're capable of, and maybe they have the wrong idea, but you don't want to turn them down because, you like who they are, but you don't think that their idea or their startup is as forward looking as you want to be, or they don't necessarily fit into your portfolio? Do you ever try to guide them into a different direction just so you can invest into that particular person?
Well, there are two questions, I think, and I'm going to answer both, try and answer both of them. First one, do you sometimes just fall in love with an entrepreneur? Of course you do. And that's one of the risks, actually, because a lot of those people are great sales, might be the greatest product, and the opposite. In fact, there is a big danger that if somebody really makes you fall in love and really kind of the salesy entrepreneur, sometimes the execution may be not as great in our experience. Right. So that's why you have investment committees where at least 3 partners haven't seen voting partners, the entrepreneur, and 2 others do, because you're trying to separate the facts from the charms. You absolutely meet the entrepreneur, you absolutely speak to them, at least 2 partners meet them, but you have some which didn't. That's to make sure you're more objective around, because a lot of them are incredible people, whatever they build something or not. The second part of your question is, do you try and kind of guide them? And absolutely on early stages. So that's why our fund more invests around round A or late seed, where you can still influence the strategy and the actual direction of the company, try to make sure that from the lessons that we learned from other companies we invested in, this company learns from, that works, that didn't. And when you're in a very late stage companies, which as portfolio matures you will be, yeah, I think that there is less of that. Yeah, there you can try, but there you're more focused on the economics and making sure that the company actually gets to the break even and profitability, as opposed to just burning investor money. So you influence more around that as opposed to strategic direction of all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I'm hearing a lot of the guidance that Digital Horizon gives to these entrepreneurs and to these companies. It's not a matter of, I see that you have something with high potential, I'm going to give you money and then just set targets and let you run, and now I'm your boss. But it's actually, you guys do care about the success of these companies and these entrepreneurs, and you actually give them the tools that they need in order to, obviously be successful for themselves and for Digital Horizon.
I'm glad you heard about that, because we take great pride, and I personally really actually love that job of helping to build and co-build, because we come from a building. Remember, we've talked about venture builder. So the entire building is really in our DNA, not only investment. And that's why
Absolutely.
I think there is a very different approach that we need to really take to the VCs. VCs are not big pockets of money which just give you in this. They have to help you build. The big pockets of money are big sovereign funds, and yes, that's their job to allocate. VC's job is also to help you grow, and I see it as a profound difference of how we operate to many other maybe bigger funds than we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen it, I've personally had my own agency at one point as well. And yeah, the investment that we got, it didn't sound anything like what you're describing Digital Horizon does for its entrepreneurs. Basically, yeah, I mean, just as you described, is here's some money, go make me some money back. And that's really just not a great way to be the people that you're now becoming a family with. And so
Yeah,
I know
it's
that,
not a VC. This is an LP job for me.
yes,
And LPs
absolutely.
are paying VCs or GPs, general partners, not to do exactly the same job, just give money. See, and I think that's I think there is a little bit of a problem with our industry right now because it became so big so fast that people forgot what's the difference really between LP job and a GP as us, general partner, managing partner job on the market.
Absolutely. And so I know that you've touched on the Venture Builder program a little bit so far. Is this a new program?
No, I think it was the oldest program. As I said, we started from it.
Yes.
Uh, and the fund really grew out of it. Fund is obviously our primary business.
Hmm.
We still do some venture building, mostly in Europe at this stage, in the UK, but quite limited. Now, honestly, for very simple reason, not that we love the numbers, the fund has just grew much bigger and it's a much bigger business
Hmm.
than this. Venture building is really when we see a talented entrepreneur really wants to co-build something with us. We don't do more than 1, 2 simultaneously.
Yep.
And we're really looking for kind of real partners in there because we're not an accelerator. So it's not like we give you 100K and see what happens and give
Hmm.
you some advice. We build it together with you. We give you the marketer, we give you the designer, the actual person.
Wow.
So we become co-founders with these people. Therefore, it is a lot of bandwidth, and therefore we are quite, I would say,
Selective.
quite selective there.
Mhm.
How and what areas, and we have to add quite a lot. I wouldn't say add value. We build together. Where with the VC fund, as we discussed, you need to help and bring a lot of value. Try to help with the strategic directions, connections. In a venture builder, you build a company.
That's great. And honestly, the story, the journey of Digital Horizon, starting off as a venture builder, so knowing how to build and grow companies, and then becoming someone that builds companies and invests in companies, to me that just makes the most sense. It seems like a logical path that I don't know that many VCs really take.
I think we see that a lot of VC founders, like myself, have built something before. So
That's
that's,
great.
yeah. So I really like those, and I find easier to work with them. A lot of them, obviously, VC founders, like myself, also got investment backgrounds, coming from investments, this. But I completely agree. I think when somebody runs a VC fund but never really touched a tech company, it's quite difficult, I think.
I
Because
agree.
all they look is the figures. And early stages, the figures don't say that much.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the quickest way to kill an entrepreneur spirit is get them out of that creative mode and into give me the reports every single week, every single
And
month.
the other thing is having that skill, it protects the investors into the fund. So when we're speaking to our investors, LPs, they rely on our expertise to really see, is it a real business or is it a gimmicky presentation?
Hmm.
With this. And it's not always easy to see if you don't have any technical understanding. You never build those companies. You just looking at the kind of presentation and the slides. So I think this is also kind of a service to our investors, which are big family offices, LPs, pension funds, institutionals. That's their money is a little bit more protected.
Absolutely, and it makes total sense. I mean, it makes everyone feel a little bit better. It helps the LPs feel a little bit better about where's their money going, and it helps entrepreneurs know that, hey, I actually have somebody on my side that's like going to help me achieve the vision that we're trying to achieve here. It's not a big test.
Yeah, it's not this. Look, we definitely don't do pray and pray. Quite
Mhm.
selective in what we invest in. That's why we focus only on two verticals, but we understand those verticals quite well.
Yeah, it seems like you really do. So what's next for Digital Horizon?
So we opened up our office in Dubai in
Oh,
end of last year. We are looking really to look at the MENA and Africa region from there. We're identifying kind of new startups because traditionally we are more Europe and Israel. Our Tel Aviv office does a lot of work now, bringing some of the tech skills and everything to Dubai and to the region in general. So this is a new frontier for us. We are raising a third fund, which will have some solid allocation to the region, MENA and Northern Africa. And I think that will be quite exciting for us. We also had some allocations now done in Southeast Asia and India, which are new markets, and we had a new partner joining us from the region. So that's I guess things. But our big thing, yes, it's our third flagship fund, which is now being raised, and we're going to be busy with that, looking at the new economies, and while still focusing obviously on our core strengths, which is around Europe and fintech and B2B SaaS.
that's great, and it's very exciting to hear that a VC that is as successful as you are is, raising another round of funding to, to support these startups and entrepreneurs. And it's also, very exciting on our end to hear that, you're starting to focus a lot more on expanding towards the Middle East. So, how do you feel UAE is progressing in terms of creating and adopting to new technology?
I think it's actually doing very well. I think it's really opening up, and yes, it's early days comparatively to this, but I think that's why we use our Tel Aviv office, and Levi and I, which spend a lot of time in Israel, really to learn some of the lessons how Israel became a tech hub, being a comparatively small country, and what can the Dubai and the region, generally UAE, do to learn from that success story. There are very simple mechanisms that we see, and this is, for example, when the funds are given money from a local LPs, from a local investors, at least 20% the funds need to invest in the region. There's lots of kind of those mechanisms which we see there. So answering your question more directly, I think it's a great start. I think it's good that it's starting to be a little bit more open ecosystem and not a closed ecosystem, because digital needs scale. You can't just be a huge unicorn, but in a small country. And
Mhm.
again, using Israel as an example, it is a small country, but it has the third biggest unicorn count and used to be second till the last year in the world. So open ecosystem is good. Need to work a little bit on the investments and investment schemes and the funds that don't just fly in, but start basing here. And then the funds usually will base if they've got the investor base there. That's normal for them. But I sincerely believe that if we are very active 3-4 years, Dubai and UAE can become a hub from this time, at least for the region. Uh, More realistically, I think we've got about 5-6 years to go.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I'll tell you, I've been in Dubai for 8 years now, and the transformation of, where we were when we first started to where we are now. I mean, personally, from a consumer experience, it's really, kind of shifted from the times where, we used to have to pay cash for everything, literally like 7 or 8 years ago. Taking a cab ride, paying for some restaurants at the mall, you would still need to pay cash only. And now it's just so much easier. Everybody accepts credit cards. Everybody accepts the tap to pay. it's come a long way in a short period of time, and I'm excited about what is the next 4 to 5 years going to look like, considering how much it has opened up in recent times. And that the podcast is obviously powered by Fintech Surge, which is held at Dubai World Trade Center from October 10th through October 13th. And it really is the flagship event for fintech in the region. We're looking at about 100,000 plus visitors between the GITEX event and Fintech Surge, and we're bringing 800 plus investors seriously looking into investing into these startups, and seeing who is showcasing what is coming up in these trends. So as a VC, and as a VC was invested in quite a few well-known successful startups, how important do you think events like Fintech Surge is in building the fintech community?
Absolutely crucial. I think that any hub which one's like to build is usually built around networking, around people coming together. And that's organizing those events, making sure that there are VCs, there are startups, there are LPs there. Meeting together is, in my opinion, absolutely key. We definitely are participating, and this is how this is all born. When people meet together and they decide where we're going to all meet, we're going to meet at the Search in Dubai. Same thing is happening if you look at the events in Berlin, which is becoming quite a big European center, in the US center. So if you want to establish yourself, have at least 2 or 3 of those a year. Have a flagship one, which is the Search, and then maybe have 1 or 2 very specific ones. Some more specific to VCs, some more specific to the LPs, some maybe to startups. Yeah. So but that is absolutely the right strategy, in my opinion.
Great. Well, I thank you so much for your time, and it really seems like Digital Horizon is everything that we look for in a partner. I mean, you're building the ecosystem, you're building the startups that really are progressing fintech across the world, and it's great to see that you guys are expanding to the region as well. So I look forward to seeing you in October for the Fintech Surge event, and until then, I look forward to having a lot more of these conversations with you.
Thank you very much, Marcel. It was great speaking to you.
Thank you so much, Alan. Well, we'll talk to you later, and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Thank you for listening. Subscribe for all the latest updates on fintech in the Middle East, and join the conversation over on our social channels. We look forward to seeing you at Fintech Surge in the Dubai World Trade Center from October 10th to October 13th. I'm Stephen Besse, and this has been the Fintech Surge podcast, creating a wealth of opportunities.